Hello, everybody. I hope that you can all hear me. Thank you, Michel. Thank you, Chris, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you very much to IIC and Berec for organizing this conference today. First of all, I will be happy, of course, to inform everybody that we have a wonderful panel and participant to this session, it's called Recovery, Resilience and Delivery in the Digital Decade. I'm happy to tell you that we will have an introduction from our keynote speaker, Rita Wezembeek, that you know, which is Director of Connectivity in DG Connect. And then we will have Boutheina Guermazi from the World Bank, Lisa Felton from our Vodafone group, and Manuel from Liberty Global. Then good morning, everybody. Good midday. And good evening, because I think we have a session which is covering participants from all over the world. Then welcome to everybody. And before we will move to discuss, of course, the panel, I would like to do a short introduction. Then if you can show the slides, please. Just to remember that we are talking about recovery, resilience, and delivering digital decade. Next slide, please. In just 100 days, last days, all over the world, we were facing the same challenge. Next slide, please. We changed the way we live, we work, and we communicate. And a good example today, we are participating, of course, to this session. And what was changing was just introducing a new normal, taking shape and made of a number of uncertainty and opportunities by changing the society, which had to reshape all the way we were doing, but also affecting supply chain fragility and showing that it was a serious issue. For example, getting primary needs components of electronic communication services, but also for healthcare and so on and so on. But what we saw also in the society was changes in behaviors of users. And we will discuss that later on. Next slide, please. Following the President von der Leyen, there was a proposal for a common digital plan towards 2030. The communication set out by the Commission, it's a vision of what is a successful digital transformation and what it will mean for Europeans by 2030. If you have a look to the plans we have on the table, and we will be happy to listen Rita in one moment, is that we are talking about recovery and resilient plans, but at the same time, we're discussing about a digital decade, bringing us in a new world of digital services in 2030. Next slide, please. But of course, those digital services is also connecting a number of expectations linked to the green and digital transitions. And we'll discuss that, of course, during this panel. What means digital transition in green transition and digital transition? It means touching renovation of buildings, touching energy production, infrastructure, and on the digital side, making sure that we invest in secure networks, infrastructure, and so on and so on. Then welcome, Rita. It's a pleasure to welcome you today. Of course, you know, I will give you the floor just in 1 second, and let me allow for the audience, which is from all over the world today, to introduce you for the very few who does not know you already. You are Director of the Connectivity to DG Connect, which is the directorate in charge of the mission to ensure widespread access and to take up of very high capacity networks for all citizens and businesses of the European Union. But before joining the DG Connect, you were having an important role at the DG competition, where you were head of antitrust and telecommunication unit, which I strongly believe that you were very touching, very sensitive and transversal issues within the Commission and in Europe. And of course, Rita, we will be happy to listen to you. Afterwards, we will exchange a few questions with you from the panelists. And of course, we are all listening to the Commission. And what we would like to understand, of course, is that what exactly the digital decade, the recovery plan, the resilience, and so on. And to be honest, maybe I should not disclose that, but we are between us. I'm a bit lost. Then I hope that we will all understand better where we have to connect the dots from the previous and the past plans and so on, and of course the new plans for the digital decade. Then I'm happy to give you the floor, Rita, and it's a pleasure to welcome you today.
So thank you very much for this wonderful and teasing introduction. Also, thank you very much for the Berec chair and the IIC chair for inviting me to speak on this very topical subject for today. So the recovery, resilience, and the digital decade. So I should perhaps mention that we have worked very pleasantly and closely together with Berec over the past year on issues concerning the COVID pandemic and connectivity. And we look forward, for instance, to the report that is now being prepared by Berec on the lessons learned from the COVID pandemic for electronic communications networks. So you have already wonderfully illustrated that with your slide presentation, that the COVID pandemic and its impact on the economy and society have enormously underlined the crucial role of digital technologies for people, and it acted as a catalyst of major geopolitical developments. So we also see that on the other hand, the COVID pandemic has exposed the vulnerabilities of our digital space and Europe's dependencies on non-European technologies and the impact of disinformation on democratic societies. So that means that also since the European economy was hit harder than by any economic other shock during its existence by the COVID pandemic, it has become obvious that we would need to adjust our thinking, and we need to strengthen the resilience of our internal markets. We need to analyze and address strategic dependencies. We need to, of course, as you already mentioned, to accelerate the twin transition, and we need to ensure that the digital transformation of the next digital decade is coherent with our rules and our economic interests and our human values. So this is also the rationale, the coherence with our human values behind the concept of digital sovereignty. If we want to determine our own destiny, we need to also become digitally autonomous and resilient. And that means that we should focus on enhancing our capacities in key technological areas, notably connectivity, data, cloud, and microeconomics. So we need to carefully address our strengths and weaknesses. And we feel that currently the pace of Europe in digitization and the convergence of member states are not yet sufficient. And the success of Europe's digital future, also as a global actor, is not yet assured without taking further strong proactive measures. So then we focus on what does this digital decade communication now propose in order to get there. So the Commission has announced that it will propose a policy program by autumn this year, which is a very ambitious calendar for me and for my colleagues. And that aims to provide greater coherence and visibility with respect to the digital goals for digital transformation. And it does that in 4 dimensions. It does it in education and skills, which is of course key to bring the benefits of full digitization to everybody in Europe, in infrastructures, in transformation of businesses, and in government. So the Digital Compass policy program that we are preparing now will intend to operationalize the digital decade ambition by establishing, first of all, clear targets along the 4 cardinal points, by also establishing a robust governance in close cooperation with the member states, including a reporting and monitoring mechanism, and a framework for what we call multi-country projects. So in this context, it is, of course, good for me to take the opportunity as Director Connectivity to underline the importance of connectivity in this whole landscape. So we feel connectivity is not only important for citizens and businesses, as it has always been, but the deployment of very high capacity networks and 5G infrastructures will also be the basis for the development of a whole array of smart applications based on that connectivity. So we feel that a European approach to building digital capacities is indispensable. So cutting-edge European capacities require critical mass of funding and alignment of all the actors, and it also requires joining efforts and pooling resources across the Commission, member states, and private stakeholders. And only that, we feel, will lead to the impact and scale that we're looking for. Now, in this context, multi-country projects are an important aspect of the digital decade framework. And we feel indeed, as I was saying, we will not get there if every member state will only look at itself. But we feel that in Europe, with the huge market it has and the huge asset it has already in the context of digital transformation, it is of key importance that the member states bundle their efforts together with the Commission, together with private stakeholders, country projects. And in this context, the Digital Policy Programme will intend to propose a framework that will make it easy and fast to create such multi-country projects. Also, in terms of the governance, I mean, I can indeed reveal a little bit more of our thoughts, but you will also find them in the communication. I mean, the governance to us would be based on a system of annual reporting, which will be actually very much a revamped version of the DAISY report, which will have a lot of added features and which will allow us to report on an annual basis whether we are on track with the digital trajectory towards the targets that we have identified. And this reporting would take place on the basis of a traffic light systems, where we say things are going well, so Europe is in the green, or things are going less well, maybe Europe would be yellow, or on this specific topic we would be in red. And if we would be in red or yellow, that would trigger a collaborative process with the member states in order to examine what is needed in order to get back on track. So this is what we have in mind with respect to the digital policy program. Of course, it's very important also to note that in the communication, we have also announced that we would like to come to a solemn declaration that would establish the digital principles. So basically the principles that should govern people's and individuals' rights in a digital context. And it should also guide the European Union and member states when developing further regulation and legislation in a digital context. And we intend that this would be a solemn declaration by the three institutions of the European Union that would indeed list those principles for the benefit of European citizens. And we have recently launched a consultation already in that context of the development of the digital principles. Now, I'm very happy to signal that the digital decade communication, or the digital compass communication, as we also call it, had a very warm welcome by the member states in council. And actually, the responses we have received until now by member states are that they are happy with what the Commission has proposed, and that they are asking us to sometimes be even more ambitious or even accelerate our efforts, which is, of course, a very comfortable position for us within the Commission. So in this context, it's perhaps also relevant to mention that recently we updated the 2020 industrial strategy. And also in that context, we are focusing on establishing, let's say, the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in supply chains that are crucial, I mean, in the industrial strategy for a wide series of products and services, but also in the context of digital, on the vulnerabilities for elements that are crucial for our digital transformation. So in particular, also in this updated industrial strategy, we identify clearly the support for new industrial alliances in strategic areas where such alliances are the best tool to accelerate activities that would otherwise not develop. And in this context, you can, for instance, think about the Alliance on Processes and Semiconductor Technologies that is in development, and also the Alliance for Industrial Data, Edge and Cloud. So this is another, let's say, perspective through which we are working on the digital transformation and addressing also the dependencies that we have in Europe currently. Also externally, our ambition is to build a stronger Europe in the world. So this doesn't mean protectionism. It means that the EU's starting point for the international perspective is an open digital economy based on the flow of investment and innovation as an engine for prosperity. That means that we want to be an equal partner in the areas of the digital transformation. And we want to also strongly promote our core interests and values through having a level playing field in digital markets, having, of course, a secure cyberspace, and also in upholding European values and fundamental rights online. So these will be the keys of our international approach in the context of the digital compass. So this is then what I wanted to say about the digital compass. Then maybe some words about the recovery and resilience facility that, of course, also plays a key role in this whole landscape of transformation in the digital area. So as the Europeans know, maybe not all the non-Europeans know, the European member states have dedicated a recovery package of no less than 750 billion euro for let's say the recovery of Europe from the pandemic crisis. And this is historic, both in terms of its volume and its architecture. And right now, the member states and the Commission are in full process to make this recovery and resilience package work. It offers us the opportunity to leverage the recovery into a transformative process. And in that sense, it is also for Europe an opportunity that we cannot miss. So member states can now develop and deploy reforms and investments. It is important to distinguish the two and build key digital capacities, which are crucial enablers for Europe's rapid recovery and long-term resilience. Now, a few words about the RRF national plans, because there we are actually now in a very relevant and important time, because by the end of April, the member states were required to hand in their national recovery plans, in which they lay out how they intend to make use of the RRF facility in order to orchestrate their own, let's say, recovery from the crisis. So it is a little bit early, but right now I can say that 17 member states have already submitted their plans, and some perhaps need a few more weeks to finalize the plans. And we in the Commission are currently assessing the plans that have already been submitted. Of course, these plans do not come out of the blue. Already since October last year, there was a very intense process in which we worked together with the member states to develop the plans to the standard that the Council had established when the Recovery Fund was established. So based on what we see now, most plans include a considerable amount of measures and investments in the digital domain. And you may know that the member states have committed to spend at least 20% of the national endowments on digital. Now, our first indications show that member states are meeting and sometimes even largely exceed the 20% digital target. So the reforms and investments cover digital public services, but also implementation of electronic identification, for instance, in the area of digital administrative procedures, also human capital, basic and advanced digital skills, development of digital skills and education, and a whole series of other digital goals. Now here I could ask our Berec colleague who is managing the slides. I have sent only one slide, and that is also because I am always of the conviction that it's good to see something else than a talking head. And so this is actually the cover slide. But I also thought that today's audience might be interested in the first assessment of what do these RRP plans now say. And if you look at this slide, this is a slide that comes from a presentation of my colleagues from DG Recover, who are working with the member states on the RRP plans. and that has been shown last week to the European Parliament to give the Parliament a first impression of where we are in the digital plans under the RF plans, the RRPs. And here you see, for those who are interested, how currently the division is in the budget that is allocated to digital. And you see that a big chunk of the money that is currently allocated actually goes to e-government, which we think is certainly not bad. And in this context, I think it is very important also to remind or to point to the role of the government as the entity that can very well trigger demand and also be at the forefront of digitalization. Now, it's also good to see that we see a lot of resources being allocated to human capital, also to digitalization of businesses, and fortunately also to connectivity. So in that context, I'm happy to note that 2/3 of the member states are currently dedicating funds to connectivity, so to the rollout of very high capacity networks, and half of those also dedicate money to 5G networks. So also, I'm happy to know that in a number of plans, the investments are accompanied by proposed reforms. And in this context, I find very important that in DG Connect, we were able to help the member states by, at the same time as the plans were being submitted, also submitting roadmaps with respect to how they plan on accelerating the rollout of very high capacity networks. And this was an exercise undertaken by the member states in the context of the recommendation on connectivity. So also by the end of April, member states have submitted their plans on how they intend to take away obstacles and how they intend to facilitate the rollout of networks, for instance, by very down-to-earth elements as having information points where the rollout of networks is planned to take place, also having an acceleration or digitalization of permit procedures, but also on procedures how to facilitate and accelerate the handing out of spectrum. So these plans are also to a certain extent reiterated in the recovery plans, which we welcome very much. Now, I'm coming to the end of my presentation. Another element that I really find important to highlight in the recovery plans is the fact that fortunately, also a number of member states are proposing what we indeed called multi-country projects. So member states are making use of the possibility to obtain funding under the RRF for joint projects that may concern cross-border corridors, but also may concern cooperation on what you could call the big tickets. So working on cloud infrastructure, on quantum computing, so on also the big alliances that we have signaled. So to conclude, I find in order to speed up the transformation process right now, it is very important that all of us, so businesses as well as the public sector, as well as the regulators, are delivering on this digital transition. We need to set and stand for our standards and to collectively project ourselves and build on our strength. We need to pool resources and create critical mass. So we count on everyone's support for delivering on this digital transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita. I think that you were delivering a so dense information, and I hope it's not a secret for everybody. But nevertheless, I would like to invite the audience, if you have questions, please use the chat, and we will be happy, of course, to raise those questions to Rita. And I will also invite our panelists to engage immediately with you on some questions. But just for the warm-up, you know, something, and you were clarifying, if I just want to know what is in mind of the Commission for the moment. You were showing a very interesting slide on the national recovery plans. You said 17 members were submitting their plans. You were touching about e-gov, human capital, digital companies, and so on. What is for you the best surprise based on what you saw? You said, oh, this is one which is really different. Is it, you know, something which is something you say, oh, this is, of course, not comparing countries and so on, but just to say this is a good initiative and we can leverage the maximum of capabilities to move to the digital decade. This is something that you would like to share with us, which was between us, of course, Rita. Just something to inspire the audience.
Well, maybe two things to highlight. I think one general element which is important, and I already mentioned it, is the energy with which governments are also investing or proposing to invest in e-governance, and that has a whole wide series of activities. So it is e-identification, it is health data, it can be work of universities, for instance, where I think indeed this is really important, and that can also have how do you know? It can be an enormous pulling factor for the digital transformation. So that is very important. And I personally am also quite happy to see that actually quite many member states have picked up this element of the roadmaps on connectivity. So we feel that indeed this is a very down-to-earth exercise, but it is very important. And I hope that also the people from the industry will endorse that to facilitate the rollout. We know that there are member states where actually the need for civil engineering and the question, how can you actually speedily roll out, is of key importance for the transition. And so it's very good that the member states have also made the connection between what they are proposing in order to do based on their own toolbox, and doing that in the framework of the reforms that are asked for in the context of the recovery.
Thank you, Rita. And just before I give the floor to the panelists, just a quick question. You said something interesting, and at the beginning of your speech by saying we had to adjust our thinking, and you said we had to address dependencies, and you said, of course, no protectionism and so on. We have people here from all the world, and it might be a certain concern if the Commission is pushing for digitally autonomy. Can you please help us to understand what is the process ongoing about that? And if you allow me, I will say, was it new? Did we discover that just because of COVID? ? Thank you, Rita.
Well, I don't know. Is there anything that is ever really new? No, but to explain, I think, where this thinking comes from, I think there is a renewed focus, at least, or new focus on what we could call the European way. So Europe, I think, can be seen globally as being at the forefront in certain actions that we would consider like certain policies that we would consider ourselves as being typically European. And these are, for instance, elements that focus on human values, where we want to put the individuals at the center. And if you depart from that thought that you want to develop the European transition in the European way, on the basis of our own values, you have to also have ownership of the technologies and the elements that you're using. And that doesn't mean that everything needs to be produced in Europe, but it does mean that you need to be an equal partner with others who are producing or delivering such technologies. So that means that certainly we're not looking for a protectionist agenda, but we're looking for an agenda that gives ownership to Europe on the crucial technologies to deliver this digital transition. So we feel that there's a natural link between the digital principles that we are proposing in the Compass and the need to also work on getting more ownership on the technologies that are needed to underpin those principles.
Thank you very much, Rita. But I would like to invite Mrs. Boutheina Guermazi. And we had the perspective from the European Commission, and we are in Europe today, but we have friends from all over the world. We have also the World Bank, which is, of course, focusing on digital transformation and development. And welcome, Boutheina. You are Director of Digital Development at the World Bank, and also specifically looking to infrastructure practice all over the world. Do you have a burning question for Rita?
I have definitely a burning question. I think first I really want to say thank you for the great overview of the compass, and I have to admit that the first time I heard about it, I fell in love. And you mentioned it very nicely. It's based on this ecosystem approach where you need foundations around connectivity, but skills, the human dimension and the physical infrastructure are important. But it's important as it changes government, and it's important as it changes business. So it's really nice approach. And later I'll have the opportunity to show how the bank is thinking about it, and it's really striking to see the alignment on the approach. My question to you, Rita, is how much of the opportunities around the multi-country approach is something, based on the experience of Europe, is something that would be very useful for other countries, as we work with a number of countries in other regions in the world, and thinking digital means thinking big by the very nature of the topic. So these regional solutions from the EU perspective, how much of it you think is very, very relevant to countries outside Europe?
Yeah, well, I think the international element of the digital compass is that we would look for partnerships also with countries outside Europe, also based on these shared values, on the importance that we attach, for instance, to a common approach to connectivity, to 5G. So we look forward to working together with other countries on the basis of such partnerships. And I think that nothing would withhold the use of the multi-country projects as we have them in mind under the digital compass, also in other parts of the world, to facilitate and to accelerate and mobilize cooperation across countries. Because indeed we are talking about developments and projects that are too big to carry for one country, certainly within Europe, but possibly also outside Europe.
Then I understand that, the World Bank is just telling you, Rita, that they're seduced by the compass. I'm not sure if the audience is seduced or having some questions. Then let's have a look to the sector, and I would like to invite Lisa Felton from Vodafone. The compass, I understand, and we went quite quickly. It's about skills, but also infrastructure. And, I don't know, but if we talk about infrastructure, new KPIs, Lisa, is not bringing additional question for Rita?
I do have a question. First of all, thank you, Rita, for your presentation. And we also, as industry, really welcome the digital decade targets and the compass approach and the ecosystem approach. I just wanted to pick up on your points around the connectivity reforms in the national plans. Having looked at those, do you feel that they are ambitious and specific enough as measured against your own Commission guidance, which was very, very good, very clear? And also, what kind of policy reforms do you envisage in the upcoming digital policy program you mentioned, which really helped to crowd in that private investment, which is so necessary?
Wow, Rita, no, we want to know what is in your mind, please.
Well, so let me maybe first of all issue a word of caution. So currently we are in the process of analyzing the plans, and to my knowledge, there's no systematic publication by the Commission of the plan. So I would certainly not want to highlight individual plans, but I can maybe broadly say that the picture is varied. I mean, we see very ambitious and very convincing plans where member states have taken a very thorough approach and come with solid views, also ready to implement. And sometimes this has been a little bit less ambitious. But I should also say that, of course, this is the concept of the recovery facility. It is supposed to be a collaboration between the member states and the Commission. And so member states are very much in the driving seat, and they can overlook, based on their national situation, what is feasible and what is desirable. So in that sense, I do not think we can complain. I must say, certainly from the digital perspective, I'm quite happy with what I see. Now then, you were asking about whether there is a specific regulatory agenda. What I would like to say there is that what we have in mind is very much what is written already in the communication. So for the digital policy program, we would see that in particular as a governance structure that is intended to implement this communication. So the annual reporting, the collaboration with the member states, the targets, and also the multi-country projects and the vehicle for those projects, these will be crucial elements. I would personally not think that the digital policy program is the place to come with, specific draft legislation. What I would think is that if we find that in a certain area Europe is lagging behind, that's the moment to sit together with the member states and to see what can we do.
Thank you.
Rita, you are looking very serious there. Then looks like you have maybe in mind that if I try to translate, correct me if I'm wrong, but it means please do it. If not, watch out. I will make sure that it will be happening. But just wait a moment. Manuel.
No, just let me interrupt you there because
Okay,
I don't
sorry.
have that hanging in the air. The word is collaboration.
The world is a collaboration. We will come back on that. Thank you so much. Manuel Kohnstamm, welcome. You are from Liberty Global. Of course, you have probably a question for Rita too. I invite also the audience in the minutes we have with Rita today that if you have also questions, please feel free to bring them into the chat. Manuel, you have the floor.
For my question, right? That's
yes, please. Between us.
Between us, yeah, exactly. Rita, thank you very much for that presentation. It was very, very thoughtful and very thought-provoking. I had a question which is perhaps less related to the recovery fund itself in terms of connectivity funding. Looking back at the past year and the Corona pandemic and everything it caused. Within the industry for a long time we were wondering how to stimulate demand for very high-end broadband services, and for all the horrible consequences of the COVID pandemic, one thing it definitely did, it created an instant and massive demand for high-end connectivity in education, the workplace, commerce, and science, and literally the whole world population now recognizes the value of connectivity, high-end connectivity, and we should definitely take advantage of that situation. And is there, what do you think, and what do you think is there a role for the Commission in this, in further demand stimulation, because it's such an important element of actually kind of creating the right business cases to further investments in this space?
Well, also here, I would, it's a good question. And I think indeed, to me, also with my competition background, it is always very important to also look at the demand side, because in the end, you don't want to create something that the market or consumers or businesses are not really looking for. But this being said, also there, certainly in the context of the recovery plans, I would primarily look at the member states to see what they have in mind. But we should, for instance, not forget that even if you look at that from the state aid angle, there are possibilities to take measures by the member states which focus on, for instance, providing vouchers to consumers who are then in a position to afford more easily connectivity. And I think also if you talk about demand, I mean, what I find an important element, this time not of the recovery fund, but also of what we are doing in CEF Digital, is the fact that we would be ready to finance under CEF Digital. This is the Connecting Europe facility. It is another fund. We would be ready to finance what we call 5G communities. So there, this would be intended to have projects of general economic interest that would be set up by communes or by universities or by hospitals that are indeed in the public interest, and that would be eligible for financing. And that would in itself, as we see it, also be able to fulfill a kind of multiplier role, and could be an element with which we can precisely incentivize demand.
Thank you, Rita. I think our panelists, I think the panelists, they have more questions. Do you want to react to that, Manuel? Because I think Lisa is also...
Good answer.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, Lisa, you're on the starting block. You would like to come back on the discussion, please.
Yes, just a quick question. Another thing you mentioned was that you are revamping the DESI index and using that as a way of measuring success. I wondered, in that revamp, are you considering incorporating a green element to see how much digital drives green, and assessing that within the overall context?
Well, I know also the sensitivity of that discussion, and I also welcome the alliance that has been created by the operators to sort of map this area. But one thing to note is that in the communication on the digital compass, we have said that we wanted to explore whether we can also introduce a benchmark and a measure for the greenness of networks and data centers in particular. So we're thinking about that. But of course, knowing the difficulty of the topic, it's not a given yet that we will succeed or succeed to the satisfaction of member states and industry in that context.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Of course, you were discussing about the compass. Can you just, Rita, clarify where do we stand? Because we saw impressive targets by 2030, like having 20 million ICT specialists in Europe, achieving 100% of governments online with 100% availability of medical records and so on. Can you tell us, is it finished, or is it still in discussion ongoing with the member states? Can we negotiate a bit?
Depends on what you would like. So what I can say is that we have already published the consultation on the digital principles, and we would hope to publish a targeted consultation soon, also on the digital compass. So with a list of questions where everybody, being public authorities, being the industry, can react. So I would personally say, but this is really a personal note. So I find if we do such a consultation, we have to, of course, welcome any kind of reaction. Everybody should feel free to say what he or she likes. I mean, as regards the targets, the way I see them is that they have been formulated in a serious intention to be ambitious. So we feel that we should not put the bar too low. We feel also that it is very important to put a dot at the horizon to know what should be the itinerary, where are we going. But if I would talk about the debate to be currently had, I would much more welcome a debate where industry, public entities, industry associations reflect on what can I contribute to get to the end result. Then have we really identified the right target? So, of course, that debate we should not avoid, but it's to me more important to know what can everybody individually or collectively contribute to get where we want to be.
Thank you. Then, of course, I want to read in the glass where do we want to be, and I'm sure there will be discussion. And what is the timing of the consultation? Just to recall that to all the participants today.
We hope very soon to publish a roadmap and a consultation. I would hope that can be done within the next 3 weeks, and then it will be a relatively short time to react. Then
it means, in other words, that not too much holidays for the stakeholders. They will have to work hard. Just because, and of course, I didn't prepare this question, and feel free not to answer, but just for the audience, at the time at the Commission, we are discussing, of course, these digital decade plans, the compass and so on. There is the resilient plans, and I try to connect the things. At the same time, there are other initiatives, because your agenda, the DG Connect and the Commission, is very heavy with a lot of ambition. You have also the review of a number of directives, which is, for example, the NIS2, as we call it, And then, don't you see, and maybe just a question also, is that is it not potentially increasing the burden on the market players with a number of initiatives in all directions? They have to meet new KPIs, they have to fulfill new obligations through new directive reviews and so on. What is currently the situation? How do you see it? Thank you.
Yes, MIS is very much about security. And I think, to me, security is not something where you can say, I wait for the next 5 years. If we find now that there's a problem with elevators, we have to make sure that we repair them now. And we cannot say, okay, let's first make sure we invest, and then in 5 or 10 years, we see what we need to do. So this is an issue that is now very relevant, that we need to prepare also for a solid future in order to have secure networks and have secure technologies. And so I don't think that we can afford to not do that. And the only comfort that one could signal is that it will apply industry-wise. So there will not be 1 or 2 players in industry who will have an advantage. Everybody will have to adjust.
Then I understand, because you were very straightforward there, that this is the menu to have and to take, and we will continue on top of with the digital decade targets. Is it a good way to translate this message?
Well, that is a question of what is the alternative.
Yes, okay, I understand. We have still a few minutes, and of course, I'm happy to receive more questions. It seems that you were underlining the multi-countries initiatives, and you were mentioning a few of them. It looks like that from a perspective, it looks like very interesting project. Can you please, you were mentioning the corridor like 5G that we saw in different communications. You were talking about the cloud. How do we stand with those discussions on multi-country projects?
Well, what we said in the Digital Compass communication is that we were going to explore whether it will be possible to create what you could call easy to mobilize vehicle, so that for the very important multi-country projects, it will not be necessary to negotiate for 2 years every time again in order to get a proper governance, a proper structure in place. And we are actively exploring that. That's where we are. Of course, in the consultation, we look for input also by industry on what works and what doesn't work. What are their views? Also, certainly by the member states and by other public stakeholders. But this is where we are. We are in the process of exploring. So it's too early for me to say whether we can already identify what would be the features of that.
And in your exploration, what did you see? Do you see something bubbling? I mean, if you can share something.
Well, to me, the only thing I can say is that it is something that I feel is very necessary. So in a way, the signal to us and to also the member state, to all of us, is you better make it work. But that's the only thing one can safely say right now.
Thank you very much, Rita. I think we just have a few minutes in your agenda. Then, do you want to share something to the audience today? We have stakeholders from different industry, in the media industry, in the telecom, electronic communication industry. We have some platforms here. Do you have a message for them, and maybe related to the 750 billion plans? I don't know if you would like to share something, please.
Well, I think, to me, you overtake me a bit, but I find, even as a commission official, I find it is remarkable that in the midst of the COVID times, I mean, the member states and we have been able to come up with, first of all, this fund, also with the plans and with the conditions. And now that we have the plans that have been proposed and are being sort of wrapped up and in the process of being implemented, it is also very much over to the industry to work with the member states. And just as a person, I mean, I've taken up this job in January, and I find it remarkable and also admirable how these things, and also my colleagues, are delivering this from their own attic and from their own home offices. And we're working with people in the member states, also working from their home offices. working with people from the operators who do the same. And in the end, the result will have to be that the digging starts and the networks are being expanded, and also that the cloud infrastructure is put in place. So I would only encourage everybody more to work with us and with the member states to actually make it happen.
I think there's a strong message delivered here to the members, and I'm sure that the other panelists will be happy to commit on that on the second part of the discussion. Of course, Rita, you are welcome to stay with us, but I know that you have a busy agenda today, and this is too bad, because of course we will discuss and agree about things, and then we will be happy to come back to you. Thank you so much for your presence today, and of course we saw the European perspective, and I would like to invite Mrs. Boutheina Guermazi, as I said, Director of Digital Development at the World Bank, Department of the Infrastructure, to give us the worldwide perspective. Because one of the questions, of course, we didn't address in the talk with Rita today is that how those plans are combining all together. I don't know how do they find their way, but what can we learn from the European side? You introduced the question, and what we did and we do at the global level at World Bank, and how do we connect the dots? Do we have a similar, you said you were seduced by the compass. Do you have also a compass? And then maybe operators across the globe will have to follow multiple compass. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Jack. And many thanks to Berec and IEC for the invitation. Just to start, I just want to focus a little bit on the digital decade. I think it's an incredibly powerful message there. The next decade needs to be digital. We need to think digital first. And I think if we don't, we cannot talk about recovery from the pandemic. We cannot talk about resilience. So a great discussion point around those points that I think are relevant to other countries and other continents. So I'll talk a little bit about how the bank is thinking about digital transformation, and very nice that we see already a lot of alignment with the compass. And it was only a few weeks back that the bank had a very nice digital deep dive with the EC, and comparing notes was refreshing. The first slide starts by something obvious to the audience here. It's how fast the industry is moving, which I think requires all of us to rethink development, with digital not being an afterthought. We know that the digital part of the economy is growing much faster than the traditional one, at a rate of 2.5 times faster, and a bigger contribution to the GDP. We're also moving to a hyper-connectivity space, where we all know that connectivity is not only counted in terms of people connected to the internet, but also things. And this hyper-connectivity is also smarter connectivity with AI and data-driven development. We know how important is data. With the recent technological innovation, they really led to a massive increase in the availability of real-time data that is multiplied through repurposing and reuse. The World Bank just released a few weeks back the World Development Report 2021, which highlighted the framework of how data can improve lives and can deliver potential benefits, while important to think about safeguarding against possible harms. And I really invite you to check this publication out. I think one key message is it calls for a new social contract around data. Moving to the next slide, and this, I will not talk much about it, because we all know how important digital was in the context of the pandemic. It was important for societal resilience. I think this is how Michel presented when we opened the panel. It is, we've seen how the increase in mobile internet traffic, for example, and we've seen important lessons that I think are very important for us as we think about the digital decade. The lessons that are very clear is countries with strong connectivity, good regulatory framework, strong ID foundation, were more equipped than others to harness the digital tools. The other very, very important lesson is that the concerns around the digital divide are very important and very deep. Increased risks and deeper inequalities. And, I think it was called the pandemic of inequality. Just think about, over 460 million children in the world did not have access to remote learning during the lockdown. And if we think about the gender digital divide with COVID, we need a whole generation to catch up, according to the World Economic Forum. So these are important points. I want to move to our compass. I'm going to call it the World Bank compass. And it's basically this house diagram. And if you allow, I'm going to stay a little bit on this slide. I think the main thing is we're thinking about the sector as a T, right? So there are so many things in the digital sector that are linked to the sector as a sector. And this is, the connectivity, the policy framework, the enablers that are very important. And what we're seeing more of is the importance of the sector as a cross-cutting theme that enables other sectors to deliver their own agenda by putting more emphasis on digital. And this, approach that we're taking is one that, embraces an ecosystem approach. Thinking about digital foundations and thinking about supply and demand at the same time, trying to move out of the silos approach, and really trying to think about the different foundational elements. And here, reflecting on what we heard earlier from Rita, you'll see a lot of alignment on how we think about it. So digital connectivity, of course, it's the mother of all foundation. Without access to infrastructure that is available, affordable, and safe, we cannot talk about digital transformation. And here we think about it in terms of digital connectivity, but also in terms of data connectivity. How do we make sure that there is a data infrastructure, the clouds that are needed as a foundation for the different applications that we want to see. Staying in the same slide, but moving to the darker yellow, this is the other foundation in addition to digital infrastructure, digital platforms. Here we can talk about the importance of ID, for example, very important for digital transformation. As we move to increase service delivery online, having digital ID is very foundational and very important, but it is an agenda that requires a lot of attention. We still have over 1 billion people who are invisible because they don't have an ID. Then digital financial inclusion, this is very foundation because, if we talk about the digital economy, we cannot not be able to transact online, a very important foundational element. As important as digital business, here we think about two types of digital business, the whole, entrepreneurship ecosystem, the startups, but also the support to digital business for, more than startups. And how do we make sure that there is enough support, because it's linked to the content that needs to fill those pipes. And of course, digital skills is very important. I mean, this is at the heart of, the human capital dimension. How do we make sure that, people have the skills to use the internet, have the skills to create the content that are very important? And how do we look at digital skills also from the skills of policymakers, the skills of regulators? This is a sector that is moving very fast. So this ecosystem approach is very important for us. And it is foundational, but this is not the end objective. Really, when it works, when it starts to transform other sectors, and this is the green layer there. Many examples. I think we will not talk about all of them, but there is hardly any sector of the economy today that digital does not influence to a deep approach. And it's these use cases that create the demand that are very important to push digital transformation. and very important for countries to think about them in a way that there are foundation, and then the sectors come and do not replicate the investment, do not replicate the foundational layers. In the bank, we look at it as a whole World Bank approach. So it's an approach where the World Bank public sector is active, but also IFC and MIGA. And it's anchored into our objectives, the twin goals. It's anchored into helping reach the SDGs. The next slide, the next couple of slides, it's very quickly on what are the priorities that we are focusing on in the bank. Priority number one is closing the digital divide. We know there is a divide between countries, of course. I mean, the numbers are there. Still half of the world population need to be connected. And there is a big divergence in terms of regional lengths. There are more regions that, need to work harder to get to this connectivity. But also, I think what is very important, and it was highlighted very, very clearly in the context of COVID, is the divide within countries. Of course, the rural-urban divide. The rural population is 37% less likely to use mobile internet than the urban one. As I mentioned earlier, the gender divide is getting deeper and really a serious concern. And there are, divides around affordability. Data remains a luxury for many of the peoples in different regions. The affordability of data, but also the affordability of devices. So it is still a barrier for a bigger uptake of mobile and all connectivity, whatever the type of industry behind it. What we do in the bank, we'll try to focus as much as possible on understanding better the different dimension of the divide, and also working with partner. It's a huge agenda that requires all of us working together, and of course it's a big priority in most of our projects around digital transformation. A big focus on the connectivity part of it. The next priority, moving to the next slide, is really managing the risks. There is so much about the opportunities that digital offers to the agenda, but there are also a number of risks that we need to look at and we need to tackle. Here, cybersecurity is really a top priority for us. It really affects the sector across the internet value chain, from the first mile to the last mile. Given that there is increased softwareization of what all we do, it reaches application. We need to look at it also at the device stage. We know cyber attacks have increased, globally, and a big ticket item for the economy. What we'll try to do in the bank is work with many partners around this agenda. We want to tackle it not just as a risk mitigation. I think it's very important also as pushing digital transformation. When people have the trust, there is an impact on increased usage of digital. Data, very important, as I mentioned earlier. We need to understand and harness the full value of data to unleash its potential. We need to build trust environment for data, and we need to make sure that stakeholders have a fair share of the benefits of data through investment and policies. Another risk here is around dominant players and the whole platform economy. There is a renewed attention to this topic, a deeper look at competition policy. We're following the great discussion happening at OECD and WTO. We just want to make sure that the clients that we represent have a voice around these topics and around these issues. The last one is the whole green and digital, the twin objectives, very nicely presented in the EU thinking. Here we're working closely with the EU, we're working with a number of partners to tackle this. There is so much digital can bring to the climate change agenda, and as we do it, we need to make sure that any risks, climate risks that digital infrastructure have, are tackled by thinking green. The third priority, moving to the next slide, is thinking about platforms. We're very, very active on ID4D and G2PX. I think ID4D and G2P plus data each, present very important building blocks for digital transformation. But I mean, seen together as a stack, they are foundational for digital, inclusive, and resilient digital economies and societies. The last priority is embracing a green digital future. This is very important as we cannot afford to think about the sector in a static manner. So this is where, we need to think about the new frontier. They're not so new. For many of our clients, we need to make sure that as we think about the digital divide of today, we're also tackling, the opportunities that come with AI, with 5G, and we're working with client countries to think about this in analytical work and in projects, and keen to learn from the experience of the EU and other parties on this. Our work program on this agenda is built around 3 building blocks. First, we're a development bank. We do a lot of financing to these digital development activities. Important to mention that the bank own journey on digital kind of followed the journey of the sector. At one point, we used to be called telecom. Yes.
And Boutheina, this is there that I would like to gently interrupt you, because we learned about a broad plan and so on, and I would like to listen also, of course, the sector, because we now have a good view on the World Bank ambitions, and this is really impressive, and I'm sure that we will come back on that. Let's listen a bit what the sector is thinking, and again, I invite all the participants to send their question in the chat. Of course, Boutheina will not leave the session, at the contrary, and we'll be happy to discuss that in a bit, what exactly the engagement you have from the World Bank. Then I would like to give the floor to Lisa Felton, which is Head of Global Policy Program at Vodafone. And I will give you the floor because we heard the key words about the sector. And then, what is very important today also is that we heard the Commission, we heard the World Bank, we heard institutions. What is the sector thinking? We will just listen to you, and then we will listen to Manuel. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you for that excellent presentation. That was absolutely fascinating. So we have heard about the Digital Decade targets, which we are really supportive of and we think are really exciting. What I wanted to do today is just give you a vision of what that could create for everyone. What does 2030 really look like? If you could pop the slides on, that would be great. So if we think about 2030, we could think, well, our air is cleaner in cities because it's monitored by IoT sensors. Thanks to smart city platforms, energy usage is reduced and traffic jams are a thing of the past. SMEs are hopefully thriving with increased revenue from digital tools, giving them access to global markets and creating new jobs and opportunities. Gigabit connectivity is available to all if we've achieved the targets. And everyone has the digital skills they need to make the most of that gigabit connectivity, and also to start closing the digital divides. Next slide, please. Telemedicine is the norm, with patients monitored at home for the first time. So we're seeing something completely new. The question then is this possible? Next slide, please. The one after that. Thank you. Perfect. So is this possible? All of those things are scientifically possible. We're not talking about flying cars here. We're talking about very real things which are going to make differences to people's lives. But what I wanted to also share with you is the industry's view of what the barriers are to that and the importance of that ecosystem approach. So firstly, looking at digital infrastructure. The EU ambition is for all populated areas to be covered by 5G by 2030, but we're a really long way away from that today. In Europe, for example, just over 40% of rural households do not have access to fast connectivity today. And this is at a time when that connectivity has been a real lifeline. So those households can't work remotely, can't access online education. And overall, Europe has a growing investment gap of over 42 billion a year. And that's taking into account private investment. The second potential barrier is the lack of digital adoption by SMEs and the deficit in digital skills. So the EU ambition is by 2030, more than 90% of SMEs should reach at least a basic level of digital intensity. Our research during the COVID crisis shows that only 17% of SMEs have successfully integrated digital technologies, compared to 54% of large organizations, and 42% of citizens in Europe lack digital skills. SMEs face three key barriers: availability of connectivity and digital tools, capacity to reform due to cost and time, and capability, having the right skills. And the third barrier is the lack of resilience in the public sector. The ambition is that by 2030, all key services should be online. However, even before the crisis, healthcare and education were struggling with rising costs and aging populations. There is a 4.1 million gap in healthcare professionals by 2030 that we have to address. So how do we overcome these barriers? What are the enablers going forward? Next slide, please. So first, we have to improve digital skills. This is necessary for connected schools, for digital training for SMEs, for public sector workers, incentives to drive digitization. Digital skills are going to be absolutely critical. The second enabler is connectivity. As we've heard, the Recovery and Resilience Fund is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to drive a step change for Europe. At least 20% must be allocated to digital, and we've heard today that even more is being allocated to digital. As a priority, recovery funds must crowd in private investment and should be focused on achieving gigabit connectivity in hard-to-reach rural areas and closing those digital divides. My concern, seeing the earlier slides from the Commission, is this will not be the case. And finally, policy reforms. Reforms are essential for future resilience. Digital transformation is dependent on gigabit connectivity. Therefore, connectivity reforms are also essential and must be baked in a really tangible way into the plans, removing barriers to rollout, having guidelines for network sharing, creating investment-friendly spectrum licensing procedures. So let me close by just sharing some of the key data points which show Europe's huge opportunity here. So digitized SMEs have an average of 26% higher revenues than non-digitized SMEs. Rolling out telemedicine across Europe could save 48 billion and prevent more than 165 deaths annually. 165,000 deaths, annually. Implementing smart cities platforms in Europe's top 80 cities could yield energy savings equivalent to the entire electricity use of Latvia on an annual basis. If we level up and achieve 90%, according to the DESI index across Europe, this could drive an increase of 7.2% in GDP. That's a huge difference, and we must make sure no one is left behind. And I would agree with the Commission that we really have to work together, business, member states, the Commission, in order to achieve this. Thank you.
Much, Lisa, and of course we will come back on your slide because it was a good wrap up of what you just said, and I think that the slide sometimes is good to keep huge numbers that you're proposing. We come back in one moment. I would like to invite Manuel Kohnstamm, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Liberty. You were already launching the discussion about demand creation when were discussing with Rita a bit earlier in this panel, but of course, I will be happy and we will be all happy to know the broader view that you have in this discussion. Please, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Jack, and great to be on this panel. I'll share some of the experiences of Liberty Global in this space and the perspectives we have on it. As most of you know, Liberty Global is one of the world's leading converged video broadband communication companies. We've now gone through quite a few changes and we've adapted quite actively to changing circumstances. We now operate in about 7 European countries under the consumer brands Telenet in Belgium, the new Sunrise UPC combination in Switzerland, Vodafone Ziggo in the Netherlands, which we own together with Vodafone Group in a 50-50 JV. And in the United Kingdom, we're just about to conclude a historic joint venture together with Telefonica between their mobile operator O2 and our cable system Virgin Media. This transaction will support expansion of Virgin Media's gigabit network and O2's 5G deployment. And so I can tell you a little bit more of that. Actually, we just received, literally hot off the press a couple of days ago, the green light from the UK competition authorities, and we'll start that business on the 1st of June next week. Overall, across our footprint, we have millions of customers subscribed to over 18 million broadband video and fixed and mobile services. We and others have been looking for that magic formula on what will deliver the digital goals to our customers everywhere in Europe, and in particular during this strange time of the pandemic and post-pandemic recovery that's ahead of us. We all had a very steep learning curve into the digital age already. We've seen a fast forward into the digitization of education and workplace, discussed already earlier today, and we should not waste this opportunity. As we go back into a new normal, we should build on everything that we learned. So what did we do so far? We have, in the past 2 decades, we've invested billions in infrastructure to expand gigabit connections across Europe. And we're trying to do our bit to ensure that Europe as a whole can reach its connectivity goals. We've gone from offering speeds between 10 and 100 megabits to making gigabit-ready connections available today already to more than 30 million homes across our European footprint. And by far, most of our customers actually take products only of 200 megs and higher, which is already educating that space quite a bit. We're also investing and rolling out 5G services throughout Europe, both in the mobile infrastructure itself and in all of the fiber backbones that are needed to make 5G work. We think, and we really are working hard to achieve the Commission's digital decade connectivity goals by 2030. And in particular, we think that the initiative should focus on countries with significant white spaces in regional high-end connectivity, where there's work to do. In the UK, for instance, we have already committed to expand our high-end networks to over 4 million new households, which we're already halfway doing. And we're also looking at opportunities to develop this further into the regions that still need it. As an industry, we definitely have more work to do, particularly also on the mobile sides in the next years to reach those targets. And there's many challenges in the mobile world, as you know. In fixed, after many years of consolidation across the geographies that we are now active in, we are, and where everybody was consolidating, we are now entering a new stage where most companies are now creating more depth nationally, integrating fixed and mobile networks. And our own fixed mobile convergence strategy is founded on the belief that companies need to provide seamless connectivity of 1 gigabit at least and 5G services as the future of high-speed connectivity. Customers and businesses don't care that much what technology connects them, but they need the best and most reliable service wherever they go and whenever they need it. So we now have these fully converged services in the Netherlands through the Vodafone Ziggo combination, in Belgium with Telenet after it bought Base, and Switzerland when we combined the fixed systems of UPC with Sunrise Mobile. And then the UK system will be added to that. we really believe that fixed mobile convergence is going to be a massive driver of growth, of experience, and of innovation in this space, leading to happier customers, but most importantly to significant further innovation. We also keep working on the European security and digital green agenda. Last week we announced a new venture with the company Digital Colony on contributing our digital infrastructure assets, including real estate portfolios and edge computing capabilities in particular, into a new company that we will serve to grow, to develop a growing demand for scalable data center capacity closer to the edge and where customers really are. We think that's going to be a very significant new area. And another example we kickstarted, and that's more in the line of the green agenda, we started a company called Liberty Charge, because many of the Europe's telecom networks have very dense networks throughout urban areas that are really capable of helping the electric charging infrastructure for cars in modern cities. So what did the pandemic do for us, and how are we adapting to it? We experienced significant increase in downstream and upstream capacity, between 20 and 40%, as you can imagine. Social media traffic went up incredibly. Gaming traffic went up 100%. VOD 30-40%. And definitely most of the infrastructure players in Europe had to deal with that, had to increase their capacity, but we all weathered that storm quite well. Perhaps in the early days we saw some glitches, also with, by the way, with the providers of the streaming services that were very heavily used for the workplace and for education. But all of that has significantly improved over the past 12 months. I think everybody online will testify to that. You hardly see any streaming services glitch anymore. And you see also very significant new innovations, working remotely, distance education. They're all here to stay, and will add on new layers of virtual reality and artificial intelligence. To give you one example, I know that our company is now using data from digital workplaces like MS365, because they're capable of actually measuring effectiveness of team cooperation and productivity and ways to improve it. So we see really, really significant new opportunities here. We agree with the Commission and its industrial strategy, and we emphasize the significant opportunities that are there in accelerating the development and deployment of digital capabilities. And as I said before, I think it should really be a two-pronged approach, both working on stimulating those regions that still need the connectivity, and demand stimulation, which has now got this golden opportunity ahead of it. The pandemic has demonstrated that the European Union at this moment still suffers from underinvestment in a number of regions and dependency from other regions for those critical parts of the supply chain, and we need to work on that. There's also still barriers across sectors and in digital skills, but the Commission also recognized these kind of barriers of a more down-to-earth nature, inconsistent regulatory approaches, literally building permits, rights of way of local city authorities, which are sometimes actually significantly delaying the rollout of new networks, and fragmented approaches to things like spectrum assignments. And all of that still needs to be overcome, and more pressure in that area is needed, certainly from the Commission and European authorities. And we are very happy and supportive of the European kind of policy revisions that make all that possible. I think from our perspective, also the national recovery plans, they should keep that strategic approach towards the digital transition, combining both reforms and investments with a lasting positive impact on the future of the European digital space. So with all that, we support that digital compass and the targets for 2030 full-heartedly. Concluding, we're very happy and proud to be building these resilient networks over the past kind of decades, and we're strengthening now our position with this kind of fixed mobile convergence. We think that is the path forward, and we're very actively looking at ways to innovate on those networks further. In our view, private investment is still the trusted vehicle that will deliver the next stage in connectivity and digitization. The good news is also that, certainly in the past couple of years where interest rates were very low, we've seen a lot of money, a lot of private equity money also coming into kind of infrastructure build throughout Europe, and that is something that should be welcomed. It's good to see that some public money kind of injects here as well, but the one thing we should see is that the public money, when it comes in, is applied to those areas where it's market failure, and that it doesn't crowd out private investment. But we are ready for the challenge. Thanks, Jack. That was my investment.
Thank you, Manuel. I would like to invite the panelists, of course, to react, because in the discussion, and please, I invite again the participants to send their questions in the chat. I just want to come back quickly on your talk, Manuel, and also on Lisa. You were talking about enablers, and you were both mentioning policies reform and having investment and so on. Then, we were discussing with Rita, and she's not there anymore, too bad, about those policy reform needed. And I think and you also said, nearly everybody in the panel, which is a question mark to me, that you embrace the compass and so on. It's not so often that the market players embrace everything, new target and so on. But I will come back to that later. Let's just stop 1 second on the policy reform. We have policymakers here, we have regulators. What are the key messages you would like to deliver to them today? What do they need to do at European level, at government level, and at regulators level? Can you please elaborate a bit? If you doesn't mind, Lisa, you have the floor.
Sure, no problem. So we really welcome the fact that we're seeing some governments really start to adopt these policy reforms, which in turn really incentivizes investment. And Spain and Greece, with the auctions that they're looking at, are really good examples of that. So our view is that the member states really need to buy into the Commission's vision in terms of implementing the connectivity toolbox, ensuring investment-friendly auctions, and really removing those deployment barriers to the rollout of networks. And also looking at network sharing. So network sharing is particularly interesting because there is a need for clear guidelines. If network sharing is done in the right way, it can really support efficiencies and energy savings. So we also see that one as really important.
Jack, I think you're on mute.
Yes, that's the most favorite thing. I just want to make sure that at least someone tried to listen to me. Thank you, Manuel. Then what about, we just heard from Lisa, friendly auctions, network sharing. What can we add on the list? And investment? And just allow me, because I saw it from the chat, is that there are people saying, oh, the telecom sector got a lot of benefits from the COVID situation with the incredible numbers. And if we look to the communication that Ofcom did recently, a serious increase of the usage of the network, increasing of streaming services and so on and so on. Then the telecom sector is a winner from the crisis in a way. But just to come back on the policy first, do you have other policy requirement today? I think we put that on records for the Commission.
Are you asking me?
You're asking me or Lisa?
You, Manuel.
Okay. Well, first of all, I completely concur with what Lisa said. Certainly the investment-friendly kind of adjustment of things like the spectrum auctions is super important. There was a time in the early years 2000 when all governments were interested in was literally getting money in for the treasury, and they couldn't care less about the impact on investment potential, and that's now changed. And we see, a lot of auction conditions. Yes, there is a commercial element to it, but the conditions in many countries are now such that companies bidding are actually incented to invest as quickly as possible and as widely as possible. So that's good. There are, of course, challenges. We have the challenges of the network security, which is the geopolitical debates about kind of the mobile equipment, which has price effects. I mean, we're not disputing those issues, but we need to be mindful of the price effects and the shortages that could appear. Not everything is something that can be resolved by policy only. We actually today, the pandemic, yes, has caused a lot of extra usage of our networks, Jack, but it hasn't necessarily brought a lot of new money into our kind of revenues, right? Also, we are seeing some challenges that the pandemic has caused. For instance, in the chip sector, we have a significant worldwide shortage of chips, which has an immediate lock-on effect in some of the equipment that our companies need. So we were looking for ways with governments and with the European authorities to see how we can overcome those kind of challenges. On a more down-to-earth level, it is literally when you roll out new networks, in my experience, local authorities are the biggest limiting factor. The rights of way, opening up streets, coordinating with other utility operators who open up streets to make new network build out go faster. That is something that will require constant attention, because it's otherwise it is something that will slow down the growth of these networks.
Thank you, Manuel. Just to come back just shortly on I see on the chat about investment. Do we really need to have investment from public funds and so on to the telco sector? Is it not the telco sector already investing a lot? Of course, we're mentioning the auctions, which is impacting, of course, the P&L from operators. But do we need big investment in the connectivity, or it looks like in all the markets is going well?
Well, we have significant geographic differences, right? There are certain areas of Europe, and I live in one, in the Netherlands and Belgium. We have near perfect infrastructure competition on almost 100% of the population, but that's not the same in all parts of Europe. We have parts of Europe where there is significant a lack of infrastructure competition in the first place, let alone kind of high capacity gigabit networks rollout. And if there is no economic case to do so, then yes, that you could make a case that there's a good reason to use public funds for that.
And just building on that point, because I think you're absolutely right, Manuel.